All right, welcome back to The Explainer. Today we are unpacking one of the absolute most intense, emotionally charged texts of the ancient world. We're looking at the Book of Jeremiah. And look, this isn't just ancient history. It's really a masterclass in how to navigate geopolitical doom and actually come out the other side with ultimate, unbreakable hope. It's a massive narrative, it's full of striking metaphors, huge political drama, and some really deep personal anguish. So we're starting right off with a gripping personal narrative. God tells Jeremiah, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you." I mean, imagine hearing that. The stakes of Jeremiah's calling were incredibly high from day one. And the thing is, he definitely wasn't volunteering for this job. In the text, he responds to this divine appointment by basically saying, "Look, I do not know how to speak. I'm only a child." He's terrified, yet he's handed this massive mandate that is literally going to pit him against the kings, the priests, and pretty much the entire society of Judah. Okay, let's dive into this. To make this dense text understandable, we're following a problem, agitation, resolution arc across 6 parts. 1, the prophet's calling. 2, the broken covenant. 3, warnings and metaphors. 4, the false prophets. 5, exile and destruction. And finally, 6, the new covenant. Part 1, the prophet's calling. Let's zoom out and look at the macro view of the situation here. The world around the nation of Judah is in total turmoil. You've got this massive geopolitical threat looming from the north. And right in the middle of all this, God doesn't just tell Jeremiah to go out and do his best. He gives him a very specific structural commission. Jeremiah is appointed over nations and kingdoms to uproot and tear down, but also to build and to plant. So it's this message of deconstruction followed by reconstruction. It's kind of like what a lot of us face when we're changing careers or habits, you know? And because God knows for a fact that the leaders of Judah are going to fight back hard against this, he equips Jeremiah defensively. He makes him a fortified city, an iron pillar, and a bronze wall. Jeremiah is absolutely guaranteed to get pushback, but he's also guaranteed survival. Let's move to part 2, the broken covenant. See how this builds? Why does God need an iron pillar of a prophet anyway? Well, it all comes down to a broken covenant. Judah is in a state of outright spiritual rebellion. The crucial point here is beautifully captured in chapter 2, verse 13. God says the people have committed 2 distinct sins. First, they've forsaken him, the spring of living water. Second, they've dug their own cisterns. And not just any cisterns, but broken ones that can't even hold water. This just brilliantly illustrates the tragedy of what they're doing. They haven't just walked away from the true, endless source of life. They've swapped him out for completely useless self-made alternatives, worthless idols of wood and stone that offer them literally nothing. And what's really interesting here is the text uses these vivid, almost shocking contrasts to describe this spiritual backsliding. In her youth, Israel is described as a devoted bride, right? The holy first fruits of God's harvest. But to describe their current, unrestrained idolatry, the imagery shifts to a swift she-camel just running aimlessly, or a wild donkey in heat sniffing the wind, totally unrestrained in her craving for foreign gods. Yeah, you heard that right. It is graphic, startling language, and it's meant to highlight just how deeply unnatural and destructive their rebellion has become. Part 3, warnings and metaphors. To communicate the sheer gravity of this, the text brings in these powerful visual anchors. God tells Jeremiah to go down to a local potter's house. So Jeremiah watches this potter shaping clay on a wheel. When the clay gets marred or messed up in his hands, the potter just reshapes it into another pot exactly as he sees fit. And this brilliantly illustrates God's absolute right over nations. Just like clay in a master's hands, God can say a nation is going to be uprooted. But, and here's the key, if they repent, he will relent. On the flip side, if he plans to build them up and they do evil, he'll reconsider. The entire future depends totally on their response to the potter's hands. Later on, we get another crazy metaphor. 2 baskets of figs sitting in front of the temple. One basket is full of these excellent early ripening figs. The other has figs so bad they're completely inedible. Now, here's the surprising reversal. You'd probably assume the people who get to stay safe in Jerusalem are the good figs, right? Actually, scratch that, it's the exact opposite. The good figs represent the exiles, the people being dragged away in captivity to Babylon. God says he is sending them away to preserve them, to build them up, and eventually bring them back. The bad figs? That's King Zedekiah and anyone left behind in Jerusalem who are facing total destruction. Exile, surprisingly enough, is God's preservation chamber. Which leads us to part 4, the false prophets. This sets up some profound agitation in the text. I mean, put yourself in the shoes of a citizen in Jerusalem right now. The Babylonian army is this terrifying existential threat, and you are hearing totally contradictory messages from your leaders. On one side, Jeremiah is out there promising absolute disaster unless you surrender. On the other side, prominent, popular prophets are promising peace, security, and everything's going to be fine. So who do you believe? The terrifying truth or the really comfortable lie? It's basically the ancient equivalent of being trapped in an echo chamber. And this conflict peaks in this dramatic public confrontation in the temple. God actually tells Jeremiah to wear a literal wooden yoke around his neck to symbolize that they have to submit to the king of Babylon. Well, a false prophet named Hananiah stands up, tells the crowd that God is going to break Babylon's yoke in 2 years, and then he physically rips the wooden yoke off Jeremiah's neck and breaks it in half. It's a stunning act of public defiance. But God's response is swift. He tells Jeremiah, okay, Hananiah broke a wooden yoke, but in its place, God is going to forge a yoke of iron. Hananiah's comfortable lies didn't save anybody. They only guaranteed a harsher, unbreakable subjugation. Part 5. Exile and Destruction. Tragically, the people choose to believe the lies, and so the warnings come true. Early in the book, Jeremiah had this vision of a boiling pot tilting away from the north. Well, that pot finally tips over. The timeline to collapse is concrete. Decades after the initial warnings, Nebuchadnezzar's Babylonian army arrives, besieges, and destroys Jerusalem. The survivors are dragged into exile. But there's a vital detail here: 70 years. God places a strict limit on this punishment. He decrees they'll serve the king of Babylon for exactly 70 years, and then Babylon itself will be punished, and the people will be restored. So it's a disaster, for sure, but it's not a permanent end. And this leads right into one of the most famous passages in the text. Jeremiah writes a letter to the surviving exiles. And instead of telling them to plot a secret rebellion or pack light for a quick return, his instruction is completely shocking. He says, build houses and settle down. Plant gardens, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you. Think about that. God is telling them to embrace the exile, settle down. It's this profound lesson in blooming where you are planted, even when your current circumstances are an absolute disaster. And that hope? It's tied directly to that exact number, 70. This number puts a distinct boundary around their suffering. God promises that when those 70 years are up, he will fulfill his gracious promise to bring them back. So even in the middle of this total catastrophe, God's plan is still very much in motion. Which brings us finally to part 6, the New Covenant. This is the ultimate resolution. We shift from geopolitical disaster to the most deeply hopeful theological shift in the whole text. Chapter 31 outlines the evolution of the covenant. Think about the Old Covenant, the one from Egypt. It was external, outward law literally engraved on stone tablets, and the people proved over and over they just couldn't keep it. Their stubborn hearts kept breaking it, which led to the disaster we just talked about. But then God announces a new covenant, and this one is entirely different. This new law is going to be inward, placed directly in their minds and written right on their hearts. It's an unbreakable internal transformation. This right here is the emotional climax of the explainer. God promises, I will forgive their wickedness and will remember their sins no more. He promises to replace all that judgment with an everlasting love and a true permanent intimacy. The people couldn't fix their own backsliding, so God steps in and says he's going to give them entirely new hearts so they can truly know him. The weeping prophet was called to uproot and tear down, yes, but ultimately his core message was to build and to plant. Out of the ashes of their broken cisterns, God promises to permanently secure them to the spring of living water. So I'll leave you with this to think about. How does a message of such absolute destruction ultimately become the profound foundation for complete personal transformation and unbreakable hope?